Hello, welcome to the Roundtable. We discuss global current affairs with in-depth analysis. With our expert views, you stay informed of the latest news from around the world. We are joined by Professor Lee Kyung-seo. Welcome to the Roundtable, Professor Lee.
Thanks for having me.
We are also joined by Professor Choi Soo-jin. Welcome back.
A pleasure to be here.
The biggest revamp since the revision of the U.S.-Japan Security Treaty in 1960. This is what was said of the result of the U.S.-Japan summit held at the White House last Wednesday. The upgrade in defense and security cooperation was particularly significant. Professor Lee, what's your overall impression of the summit meeting and the result?
Biden-Kishida summit is actually a historical summit that shows the audience in the international theater that Japan is a true global partner to the United States. So it's not just a military alliance, it's really a comprehensive alliance that United States and Japan will tackle all the global issues, not only international conflicts, but also technologies, climate change, and other old issues. And definitely this is not a new trend, but we can see this summit really institutionalized the future direction, how United States and Japan will cooperate and face all the global challenges in the future. The official visit was in 2015, after 9 years. It's like a decade event that Kishida has another official visit. So the main difference between the 2015 summit and 2024 summit is they're like heading to the same directions, but they really have a more concrete substance how United States and Japan will cooperate together.
I see. Professor Choi, as we discussed that this visit by Prime Minister Kishida is the state visit by the Japanese Prime Minister, and the warm reception was quite palpable in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, right. Well, I found several news headlines describing the summit meeting as a bromance or honeymoon between Kishida and Biden. And there was a state dinner at the White House, and the concept of the dinner was a vibrant spring garden, which was to celebrate the two countries' flourishing friendship.
I see. The most important outcome is the agreement that the two countries will jointly develop and produce defense equipment and reorganize the structure of U.S. forces stationed in Japan for better cooperation with Japan's self-defense forces. So, Professor Lee, it is no secret that U.S.-Japan security cooperation has a long and strong history. And it is no secret that Japan and the United States wanted to upgrade their security cooperation in many areas. But still, why now?
Right, so we have to look in detail about the security domains. So as I mentioned, the trajectory that United States and Japan has developed the alliance, it's not a new trend. So the trend actually began when Abe Shinzo was a prime minister. Especially Abe Shinzo was really a hawkish guy. He wanted to be to restore Japan as a normal state and want to revise the peace constitutions. But this is actually the point is we have to really focus the changes about the financial budget from Japan and the attitudes changes. So now the United States is definitely a regional power, it's a hegemon, but it's not United States in during the Cold War. So the point is the United States, it's no longer can handle all the issues alone. Definitely United States need a partner in the Indo-Pacific. And in that sense, Japan, it's a really productive and helpful partners. And in light of the deepening China's military assertiveness, Japan and the United States have a same enemy and have a same goal. And in that sense, Japan really ramped up the financial budget. And in that sense, the United States and Japan going hand in hand to tackle future security issues. So the first one we have to think about first in the security domains, it's about the more tightening security cooperations, about the command issues. And they're thinking about the joint operational command, for example. We will talk about later more in details and make a comparison between the United States and Iraq alliance and United States and Japan alliance. But definitely they will more have a close coordinations between the United States military operations and the Japanese self-defense forces.
Is upgrading of the U.S.-Japan security cooperation eventually affect the U.S.-ROC security cooperation?
Traditionally, and the conventional wisdom taught us the U.S. alliance system in Indo-Pacific, it's so-called the hub and spoke system. It's like a big difference between the European multilateral defense security cooperation systems. But you have observed the changes, especially in the 21st century, in light of the rise of China. The principle, it's the hub and spoke system, but there's a growing many-lateral security agreements. For example, Quad, AUKUS. And in that sense, Japan is center in this many-lateral security cooperations. And why Japan is a corner country? Because Japanese security strategy is definitely in line with Washington's strategy. They have the same national interest. They have the same national enemies. For example, China, North Korea. In that sense, Japan needs the United States. United States needs Japan. So in terms of the burden sharing perspective, there's a perfect partners that United States will rely on Japan and Japan will rely on United States.
The United States and Japan will also strengthen military cooperation with the members of AUKUS, a trilateral security partnership among Australia, the UK, and the United States for the Indo-Pacific region. Biden and Kishida announced a new joint air and missile defense strategy that involves Australia. The two leaders also announced that the United States and Japan will begin trilateral military drills with the UK on a regular basis. Professor Che, for the sake of viewers, could you kindly explain in layman's terms what AUKUS means and why Japan shows a great deal of interest in participating in the AUKUS? Because AUKUS in original form does not involve Japan.
Yeah, right. The term AUKUS, AUKUS, is an acronym for Australia, United Kingdom, and United States.
So AUKUS.
Yes,
Okay.
right.
All
So it reads AUKUS. And the three countries made this agreement in 2021 to make a cooperation in terms of diplomacy, security, and defense in the Indo-Pacific region. And this agreement has two parts, Pillar 1 and Pillar 2. And the part Pillar 1 is about supporting Australia to acquire the nation's first nuclear-powered submarine fleets. And Pillar 2 is about developing the high-tech weapons, utilizing, for instance, artificial intelligence and quantum technology. And it is the Pillar 2 that the AUKUS members want Japan to join. Many experts are saying that Japan is kind of feeling a fear of China's military buildup and the territorial claims that has been recently made. And also, Japan might have thought that it's necessary to kind of have a mutual protection and collective deterrence by joining AUKUS. And if Japan joined the AUKUS, then they might kind of solidify their foundation to strengthen the military power.
Yes. But first, there's also a report that the high-ranking U.S. official also mentioned the possible membership of South Korea to the AUKUS, not just the Japan.
Yeah, right. I think many experts are seeing that the expansion of AUKUS is really likely because the U.S. would kind of making a collective style alliances and try to form the multilateral networks with its allies. So it was not only South Korea or Japan, but also New Zealand and Canada has been considered as a potential member of the AUKUS. So if the country can contribute to the peace and the stability of the Indo-Pacific region, I think borrowing many experts' views, including Professor Lee's opinions, I think it's possible that they could join the AUKUS as a new partner.
What do you think of this report about the ongoing expansion of AUKUS to include not just Japan, not just South Korea, but more countries?
This is actually the main criticism from Beijing, viewing like AUKUS, expanding AUKUS as a stepping stone to create a Asian-type NATO. But as Professor Che mentioned, it is likely that, and I think the South Korean government is also positively review the possibility to join AUKUS. But in terms of the purpose, we have to really clear-cut what the main purpose of AUKUS is. Because South Korea and Japan and New Zealand and Australia, they have a different national interest, they have a different foreign policy goals, and they have a different enemy. And so in that sense, we have to really be careful, but we have to definitely positively review the possibility to join AUKUS, because in Pillar 2, this is actually a cooperation not only in defense area, but also in the high-tech, quantum area Korea or AI technology or 5G technology. So in that sense, like thinking about the security economy or the competition about the high-tech areas, it's really a good avenue for South Korea to get the benefits and reap the benefits by joining AUKUS.
I see. Amid this situation, Prime Minister of Japan Kishida pledged to continue efforts to hold summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. But Professor Lee, second in command in North Korean government, Kim Yo-jong, made it clear at least twice that North Korea has lost any interest in pushing the agenda of summit meeting with Japan's Prime Minister Kishida. So is Prime Minister Kishida knocking on an open door?
So my reading
Yes.
about the Japanese suggest a proposal to having a meeting with Kim Jong-un, it's actually more like a domestic issue. Right. So the Japanese abduction issues, it's actually a critical issue, and all the Japanese population are paying attention to it. And you remember there was a summit between Kim Jong-un and Go Ijimi in 2002 and 2005, right? So, and then Kishida actually had like facing a low public approval rating right now in Japan. It's about 20-ish% right now. And as external factors to rebound its domestic popularity, like Kishida wants to have a summit with Kim Jong-un. But it's a wishful thinking, I would say, from the feasibility perspective. And as I mentioned, like Kim Yo-jong like kept mentioning about these issues. But without talking about nuclear issues, without talking about security issues, I don't think like Kishida and Kim Jong-un will put on the same table and just talk about the abductees issues.
Okay,
Yes.
I see. Professor Choi, what do you think? But what about the feasibility of the summit meeting between Kishida and Kim? Because at least there is a strong commitment made by the Japanese government for the summit meeting with North Korean leadership. And second of all, the Biden administration, even at this summit meeting, expressed its very strong support for dialogue and negotiation between Tokyo and Pyongyang. So a blessing of the United States is there. What do you think about it? Is it possible for the summit meeting to actually happen?
Well, I think many experts might agree with what Professor Lee just mentioned. Borrowing from those opinions, I would say that the summit meeting between the two countries is far less likely, at least for now. From the perspective of North Korea, I think they are not yet prepared to address the issues raised by Japan, like the abduction of Japanese people or the North Korea's nuclear programs, right? So since the two countries are having different interests, how can they be in one table?
But if I were in the position of Kim Jong-un, then having summit meeting with Kishida government Japan would have an effect of driving a wedge between Japan and other two security partners in South Korea and the United States. What do you think?
International structure-wise, so like United States, Japan, Korea, it's one side, the democratic bloc, especially in the Northeast Asian region. And then there's a really deepening relationship between Moscow, Pyongyang, and Beijing. And I would say, and I think Japan and Pyongyang are not the flagship that can really break these structures, because sudden reconciliation in Northeast Asia and changing the security structures, I think it's impossible. If still there's a possibility between a meeting between Kishida and Kim Jong-un, I think South Korean government can welcome it, because we are close like friends right now after like David Camp summits, and Yoon and Kishida actually open a new chapter, and they're really close, have a close coordination in the security issues. And if Japan, unlikely to think about Yoon will meet Kim Jong-un and talk about these issues, but if Kishida, like instead of South Korea as a security partner, then there's a good possibility that we can really support the summit, and then we can share their results. And this is why I think United States, it's unconditionally support Kishida's actions.
President Biden is seeking to use Japan more actively in countering threats and challenges from China and North Korea. On his part, Prime Minister Kishida is focusing on expanding and consolidating his political presence at home amid his low approval ratings. Korea needs to closely watch and analyze what impacts the stronger U.S.-Japan alliance will have on the Korean peninsula. Let's move on to the second topic. The surging prices of this item could affect our Valentine Day or Easter celebration. We'll go into details after watching a video clip. Please take a look.
I spent the past 7 years traveling the world perfecting my...
In the super hit movie Wonka, Willy wants to share chocolate as much as possible. But his plan was hampered by the Oompa Loompas, the workers guarding cacao trees. We can't have chocolate as much as we want when we have no Oompa Loompa. Prices of cocoa, the main ingredient in making chocolate, are continuing to surge. Cocoa prices once hit $10,000 per ton, the first time in history. Why is this happening? Cacao trees produce fruit in the form of elongated pods, which contain cacao beans. These cacao beans are processed into cocoa. Africa is the world's largest producer of cocoa. The Cacao Belt in West Africa, which stretches from Coted'Ivoire and Ghana all the way to Nigeria and Cameroon, is responsible for 75% of global production. The surging prices of cocoa are attributable to climate change. Supply has drastically dropped due to poor harvests caused by El Niño. This climate phenomenon made the weather drier and led to frequent wildfires. Another reason is the disease called black pod rot, which spread amid heavy rains. The continuing shortage of cocoa supply also stems from a structural problem. With raging inflation, Ghanaian cacao farmers are still trapped in poverty, so they even cannot afford pesticide. It is a vicious circle. Global inflation takes a toll on cocoa-producing countries, and in turn, it drives up product prices across the world. To pay farmers, Ghana takes out loans from international financial institutions by putting up cacao beans as collateral. But at the news that the African nation has not secured enough beans to receive additional funding, prices have surged over concerns that cocoa crops would further drop. Faced with the rising prices of raw materials, the chocolate industry is on high alert. The impacts are especially palpable in countries that celebrate Easter with the tradition of eating and gifting chocolate. In the US, the average price of chocolate rose 12%. In the UK, prices of popular Easter chocolate candies soared up to 50%.
지금 최근처럼 가파르게 상승세는 좀 꺾이겠지만 예전 가격으로는 돌아가기 힘들고요. 우리나라에서도 카카오 원두를 수입해서 가공하다 보니까 그 원두 가격에 예민할 수밖에 없고 영향을 받을 수밖에 없어요. 저희는 이제 쇼콜라띠에다 보니까 조금 더 고급 하이엔드 초콜릿을 만들다 보니까 그 원두 가격의 상승에 굉장히 예민할 수밖에 없습니다. 대신 이제 저희는 하이엔드 초콜릿을 만들 때는 이제 소비자의 니즈라던가 다양한 제품을 또 만들고 한국식 이제 재료를 넣어서 새로운 제품을 이제 출시함으로 해서 거기에 맞는 자구책을 이제 준비하고 있다고 봅니다.
Has the golden age of cheap chocolate really ended?
As we saw in the video, cocoa crops have dropped by more than 30% on year in Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana, which are the world's largest and second largest cocoa producers. Climate change and unusual weather conditions are cited as the biggest reason. Professor Lee, so cacao trees are definitely affected by bad weather.
Yes, so cocoa is a crop that's really sensitive to climate change and weather change. And you know that the climate change issue is the rising temperature. It's a global issue. And definitely there's the climate issues and it's the main root causes for the changes about the surging price of cocoas. I will introduce a research released by the University of California, Berkeley. And the research team announced that if the global temperature rise by 2 degrees Celsius by 2050, cocoa trees cannot survive in sub-Saharan Africa. So the Cocoa Tree Conservation Index, revealed by the International Center for Tropical Agriculture, is 35.4 points. And cocoa trees are at a real serious level as they need to exceed 75 points to be adequately protected.
I see. Professor Che, we are in a serious crisis. We may not be able to enjoy chocolates as we used to. So these countries, the main producer of cocoa in the Western African area, must do something to prevent the damages from happening on and on. So why there has not been any effective countermeasures by these producers? to deal with the situation?
Well, according to the International Cocoa Organization, ICCO, there was a structural issue beyond the abnormal climate issues. The structural issues are that cacao farmers are too poor to buy pesticides and fertilizers or breed better crops. For example, it's 56% of the cacao farmers in Coted'Ivoire and 58% of the farmers in Ghana are living under the poverty line, which was set by the World Bank. According to the World Bank, the absolute poverty line is defined as the income below $1.90 a day. So it's really a small money, right? So most of the farmers does not even make that money daily. And you know what? The farmers did not have had a chance to even taste the chocolate because they had no money to buy it. I think this is really an irony. So the governments in both countries, the Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana, are trying to reconstruct the cacao farms. I think that it's not an easy task because it really needs a considerable amount of time for the trees to grow and produce the cacao pods. And it will take like 3 years. And if it's just grown from the seed, it will take like at least 5 years. So long way to go.
So, Professor Lee, let's talk more about the crisis. So how these countries deal with the cocoa price crisis.
So the European companies and also the American companies, like it makes sense if the key ingredients price increases, and then they like intentionally really reduce the share of chocolate content in the products, and they thinking about the alternative strategy to making another product with relatively low chocolate contents. But it's a really sad story.
Professor Choi, what should be done to have a better protection of the cocoa crops and maintaining their sustainability?
Well, there has been actually several efforts already been made to increase the productivity of the cacao trees. For example, the researchers in the Tropical Agricultural Research and Higher Education Center, they had worked on this issue for over 30 years. So they crossbred the wild cacao trees and tried to come up with genetic diversity. And they also developed new varieties of cacao trees and tried to make them more resistant to disease and droughts. In addition, researchers in the Penn State University also identified the genotypes which are tolerant of the disease and the genotypes that are susceptible to them. And they kind of did some DNA sequencing and then developed genetic basis for disease resistance. So based on all these efforts, it will hopefully contribute to producing more cacao trees. And in addition, I hope that it also contributes to enhancing the lives of the cacao farmers.
So more cacao trees and the better protection of them combined, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay, good. Professor Lee, you talk a lot about the international security as a public good, like oxygen for everyone, right? You do not appreciate oxygen, but once you lose it, you're so desperate.
Yes.
I like to liken chocolate to international security as a universal item, so precious to everyone in the world. So this would require unilateral, multilateral, and international effort to deal with, right?
Absolutely.
Like
absolutely.
international security.
Yes, yes. Security issues dominates all the issues. And also, like, because of the conflict between major powers, like the ordinary people, they are suffering because of the high price of cocoa. So we need a really close coordination between global powers, especially of the climate change issues. In the contemporary era, it's really a stat.
But if there is a virtue coming out of this crisis, is that there is a growing recognition that climate change is not just a distant, abstract threat, but real threat for today's world. The climate change used to be not a major topic of international security at the university for the political science courses, but today it's one of the major topics. The world has changed.
Right, but so definitely the coordination between global powers are really important to stabilize the price of cocoa. But we have to think of we also have to focus on the development of technologies. For example, I will introduce a case. So in 2021, researcher from the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology succeeded in the artificial cocoa cultivations.
Okay.
So definitely, so if there's an external factor, for example, climate factors that affect the cocoa price, then the people are thinking about the new technologies, the artificial technologies to stabilize the price. So definitely human beings are thinking about an alternative, and the advance of technology, I would say, it's a really, we have to focus on, and this is actually, in a broader sense, why technology is so important and have a really huge impact on people's daily life.
Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get. This is a famous quote from the movie Forrest Gump. I hope that cocoa prices will stabilize soon, and we'll be able to enjoy the bittersweet treat the same way as we used to. It is time to wrap up the program. Professor, thank you so much for sharing your insight and opinions on a variety of issues today.
Thanks for the fruitful discussion.
Thank you.
We'll be back next week. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.